Okay, guys, today we have on Anatoly from Solana. Needs no introduction. I've had him on before, so we're going to hop right into it. Recently launched the Seeker phone. This is like a big push from your side. I received one for free. It was a pre-podcast bribe, so I have a little bit of experience with it now. What's the big unlock with the Seeker?
I think just the fact that we sold more units is the big unlock. I know it's dumb, but basically it's an incredibly hard problem to bootstrap a platform because you want developers to build in your platform. That's what a platform does. But developers are not going to build unless you have users. So, this is why a lot of alternative phones, alternative operating systems have just failed to compete with Google and Apple. Like Facebook and Amazon failed, basically. So the cool thing about crypto is that you don't need a lot of users to generate a lot of revenue. You kind of look at Hyperliquid, they have 30,000 maybe daily actives, traders. That's it. That generate insane revenue, right? Basically any Fortune 500 would die for that amount of revenue that Hyperliquid is getting right now. So the cool thing about crypto is that these are the spendiest people on the planet, and you can kind of sort of target them directly and get them a device. You can then lower the cost for devs to connect with them and start building out that kind of platform economy that you need.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically the understanding that I have of the Solana phone. There's been these massive monopolies like Apple and Google for a long time now, and they have these,
they charge 2,000 to 3,000 basis points.
Yeah. Okay,
it's
so
insane.
Yeah, so
investment bankers can't even charge that much.
Yeah, so then the premise is, okay, Solana, because it is permissionless to build on, needs hardware to connect to this decentralized app store effectively. Is this the notion?
No, it's that I see like a 3,000 basis point opportunity that you can drive a truck through. And it's hard, but that's the opportunity.
Okay, but right now it's still built on Android, right? And does Solana have it? But okay, so the long run goal is for there not to be a Google Play Store. Is that correct?
No, there just needs to be an alternative distribution channel on Seeker and all the Seeker devices that's alternative to the Google Play Store that has different moderation and different financial rules. And if that exists and that becomes lucrative for devs, they will deploy in that app store versus the other one. Because why would I deploy it through the Google Play Store and pay 20% when I can deploy through the Solana store and not pay 20%, pay transaction fees, like 50 basis points or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, first of all, I'm not trying to denigrate. I think it is, for how critical oftentimes I am of all the vaporware we build. I must say, shipping a piece of hardware is, there's something to be said for that. Okay. Like putting your money where your mouth is, right? My biggest qualm right now, and I'm going to use an analogy that you use, is right now, to me, the problem with the Seeker is it's not a problem. It's that it's not an iPhone. And when I look at what would be, and I said I was going to use an analogy you use, you often talk about 10x unlocks. Like something needs to be a 10x in order for you.
Yeah, there's no 10x better phone. This
exactly.
So I think the phone is as good as it's going to get. So I think we're at peak handheld device, which is fine. It's actually the time to go try to build and try to wedge yourself into the market. What will make a user change behavior, switch from an iPhone to an Android? That is a really, really hard question, unless there is exclusive content on this device that they cannot get anywhere else and they want it. So that would be a reason for them to switch.
Okay, can you think of an example for that? Because I concur that there's this massive monopoly, right? There's this massive take rate from Apple and Google, right? But the user doesn't, we don't think about that when we open whatever random apps we have on our phone. What is some massive unlock that from the consumer side, there's some symbiotic relationship there with the developer wanting to build there, and also the user saying, this is only possible on Solana or only possible on Seeker.
So a developer that is paying 20 to 30% on digital content sold through the Apple or Google stores knows the 1% of users that generate 80% of their revenue. They know those users. They know who they are because all that is pretty easy to track, and all digital content sales are extremely power law distributed, unless you're building like productivity Excel sheet apps or something like that. But for like games, all of games, loot boxes, all of the 100 billion a year mobile spending is very power law distributed. It's very concentrated. So those developers can then target those users directly and give them exclusive content that those users want because they see their spending patterns to move away from Google or Apple and thus get that 20%. So for that to playbook to play out, we need to kickstart it. Crypto's the way to do it. 150K sales is pretty good. Like, I think it gets us to the crypto level of developers who are like, okay, I'm a crypto dev. I'm only going to get 20 to 30K users anyways. I can go build crypto specific apps for Seeker. If we get to 1 million sales and we get 1 million concentrated high spending users, I think this is where you'll see like a dramatic shift. Like, I think the App Store revenues are going to be quite significant and it'll be like a real thing. I don't know if we can get to 1 million sales, right? This is like, it's hard, but I didn't know we could get to 150K sales and we got there. So now we got to figure out, run enough experiments to hopefully one of them works out.
Yeah. I mean, look, once again, I'm not trying to be too critical here because there's something to be said about a crypto project where you receive something in your hand that you can hold and you can see it's real. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not like, I'm generally optimistic. I guess the one last thing on this that I would question, and I think you've sort of answered this, but like what does the hardware have to do with the software? And what I mean is like, what prevents you from just having a parallel Solana app store on Android? I know it's more difficult on iOS, like this, like quite right, but like Android being more composable and so on and so forth. Why does it need the actual Seeker phone versus just this? Or is this just the way to like get it out there, and then eventually people with Androids that may not be the Seeker?
Android could eventually open up their APIs, and there's like a very slow project in the core Android to do this. So you could run the signing environment and set trust zone and stuff like that. There's a bit of work there, and that would be a fine way to do it. Like for us to only deploy software and build a distribution channel this way through like any hardware device. And that's actually easier, man. Shipping hardware is hard. Like, sorry, that's fuck. But like, even if we do that, we would likely still try to build a flagship phone that is like the Seeker, like how Pixel ships every 2 years. They try to push the other OEMs to go like optimize and rebuild everything towards a new standard. I think it's worth it for the Solana mobile team to kind of constantly look at that signing loop and the user experiences and just make it as good, as well as possible, because I don't think any other OEM is going to be incentivized to do that, right? They will ship it because we can, like, they can make money off of it, so they'll add it. But they're not like, it's not their baby, right? So I think it's worth it for the core team to keep kind of pushing this forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just out of curiosity, how much time, like, if you had to guess, like, what percentage of your time is spent now on this, like, mobile push?
It varies. It was a lot more in the earlier days. Now I'm at, like, we're kind of in the flywheel shipping stuff, like getting user feedback and fixing things. It's kind of mostly, I don't need to be opinionated about a lot of things now, so maybe a third of my time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll keep playing around with it. Again, I respect the real thing in hand. Like, it's like that alone is an unlock. Okay, let's just hop into like some surprise you questions. How much is Solana, in your opinion, needing to respond to Hyperliquid right now? Just like directly, like, do you feel the push? I feel
for
it
sure.
From what I read. Yeah. So go ahead. I want to just hear your like,
to me, this is like the biggest opportunity, because what in my mind Hyperliquid is showing is that it's possible to compete with Binance, which is great.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Then that means that like we're too far down the rabbit hole of permissionless blockchain. And I
Right.
guess like probably ideologically, this is kind of what I am more interested to work on. Um, I don't know how to build a perp exchange, but I can talk to the teams that see that opportunity and figure out what do we need to unblock them without sacrificing that permissionless side. If we have to
Yeah.
run permission validators, like if we have to kill basically the network and restart it with a permission set of validators, um, to me, that would be a step backwards in technology. Um, because this is kind of like, I think, violating some of the core cypherpunk. I mean, I'm not like, I'm not going to call myself a cypherpunk, but I am a open source geek. I grew up in the 80s. I mean,
Yeah.
like the 90s, fucking around with Linux and being able to work on it and compete with Microsoft, which was like really, really freaking cool. So I want a permissionless network. This is what I'm interested to work on.
Yeah. Do you, I think this is like the, what a lot of us have realized. Maybe some of us thought this prior, but the fact that Hyperliquid has a centralized matching engine, is there a way for Solana to compete? And if so, I was talking about to Benedict last week, and he was like sort of explaining some of what he views as the maybe hindrances to composability, in the sense that there may be with like a Perp Dex a situation where you just have to have certain orders that need to get in there, right? And they need to get in like every block or whatever. And I think this is what you're working on, maybe to some extent. I don't know which of the acronyms like ACE and BAM and all this stuff, but
Yeah.
do you see like what do you see as like the way to put a Perp Dex on Solana to the extent that, you know, you
Yeah.
want to call it
So
on?
you should look at the there's people that understand this way more than me because I'm not as plugged into the day-to-day microstructure stuff. But basically, from my kind of network level view, there's been this like incredibly rapid innovation in the spot market microstructure. We went from Serum to like these wacky AMMs that were using Serum, like Radium, to Alfinity, which was very opinionated about how orders and everything else were landed in there. And then people innovated on top of that and built SolFi and Humidify. I don't even know like which. I know some of the teams that run these, but I don't know. Looking at the top five
Yeah.
prop AMMs, I have no idea where they came from or who is running them. Like these are some people call them dark AMMs, but basically what these things are is that they're very opinionated about that XY equals K curve and how liquidity is updated by LPs inside this AMM. So they've optimized the amount of cycles and therefore priority, like how low of a priority fee you need to pay to move as much liquidity as possible and as accurately as possible. I kind of think of it as like, I remember back in the day arguing with Tarun about Clob versus AMM, and what he suggested is you just draw a spline like a curve through a bunch of points, and that's your curve, and that's the curve that you want to use. And you have a bunch of these LPs pick whatever curves they want, and the fact that takers can go pick and choose either one through a router like Jupiter effectively creates this unified global atomic order book. This is kind of like, I think the really, really cool thing about how Solana ended up really dramatically shrinking the spreads in the
Yeah.
network. So you had like, and this isn't zero sum. We had 5 basis point spreads a year ago. Now I think they're sub 2 or 1. Um, and fees have gotten lower, and prices for users have gotten better. And these AMMs make more money. So this is kind of a non-zero sum evolution that happened really, really quickly. I think for perps, we basically need to see the same thing. You need a bunch of teams to launch products, then see what the nuance of like the microstructure and how those things work, and then go optimize them.
Yeah, it seems I'm curious though with regards to these, we'll call them prop AMMs, or so your council doesn't get mad. These prop AMMs, did you envision this being the in game with Solana?
No.
Exactly. Yeah, because also the thing is this is one of these things where it is very clear that users are getting better execution on the big pairs, right? Because there's some black box that's running this, but at the same time, how much has your mind
it's
changed?
It's not a black box. It is opinionated box. It's not a standardized box like a central limit order book where all the ways to post and take liquidity are very simple, right? It's a box that has a very complex update function. So it's a very opinionated box that is hard to model, but it's a box that can give you really, really good prices because of that.
Okay, so is this good enough? Right, like this, like you say, spreads are already competing with Binance. Now, I would qualify that by saying it sounds to me like this
the thing is that like the other side of it is that the network is constantly reducing, reduce latency, improve bandwidth, which allows these boxes to become more and more expressive, and for that set of splines to become closer and closer to approximating the real world. Right? Like all these things that are running the models and functions inside of them are a model. They're an approximation. The error is like basically what causes spreads to widen. But the more bandwidth, the lower the latency, the closer that thing becomes to what the real world actually has to price these assets at. And that error, reducing that error means everyone makes more money and users get better prices. So this is a very, very dumb physics, like computational physics problem. We need to increase bandwidth, reduce latency, let there be an open market for people to compete on how to offer prices and how to take them. And I think that'll effectively work itself out. Yeah. And I think the beauty of this is that like we don't have to sacrifice permissionlessness here. We just need to make sure that it's a very competitive market.
Yeah. How do you feel about sort of the concentrate? You can respond to this however you want, but like the concentration of order flow and maybe the different actors along the line. And I often hear your response, which I think you really believe it. So I'll give you this, which is like compete, right? Compete against them. But there are some arguments with like Jupiter and Helios, where these are entrenched actors. And the one other thing I would add here is like
they're not entrenched. They built a good product.
Right. Okay.
It's permissionless to enter and compete with them. And because of that, Jupiter is forced to improve their product every month. They're constantly shipping an improvement. Same thing with Jita. Because if they didn't, D-Flow would take Jupiter's like revenue, right? They would take their TAM. If Jita stopped innovating, Temporal or Paladin or whoever else would take their milkshake, right? This is a very, very, very competitive market.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. All right. I want to go back to the perps and Hyperliquid thing for a second. Like, also we can maybe bring in the concept of just like centralized sequenced L2s, which obviously you have been very vocal about. I mean, how much of this is something that you talked about how like if we had to restart the network and add like permission validators, that doesn't fit with what you were hoping for, right? But it's interesting. I think all of us have just realized that
no one wants to do that. I don't want to do it. Okay. I'm ideologically opposed to it.
Right.
No one has ever suggested we do it. In fact, these hard problems have always been an opportunity to me. Like, every time we are like hit with like a problem that has a complex engineering issue, that is like the pot of gold. Because if you solve that, you have a very huge unlock. So to me, like being able to close the gap on a product that is as good as Hyperliquid and let the markets decide at that point, that is an opportunity.
Yeah, but okay, I understand that. What I think I'm curious about is like how surprised were you, or were you not surprised that these L2s just run on single boxes, right? Like we could be reductive here and say like they're just running matching engines in the basements of Base and Arbitrum, and not to throw Hyperliquid under the bus here, but they run a centralized matching engine, right? And a great product, and it seems people love to use it. But this is something that, like, when you started Solana, the entire premise was like this idea of decentralized execution, and now and the idea was, okay, we want to decentralize in order to be censorship resistant, right? Like that's part of the ideal. And now it's like, okay, well, you can just do that. How surprised have you been to see this like continued trajectory towards increasing centralization on like the execution side?
I mean, that was the whole criticism to the L2 model. You're just rebuilding TradFi with bigger settlement fees. That's bad for users at the end of the day. Like I think it's in my view, like I think it's not going to win against Nasdaq because Nasdaq provides the exact same thing but cheaper
and more centralized.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm not a huge fan, obviously, but I think it's worth it that I guess it's fine. Like I don't really care if people build other L1s, other L2s. All these things are effectively like there is this I think everyone is competing actually for the same end goal, which is to be a global dominant execution platform. That's it. That's like the end prize, because that is where you generate the most revenue. I think it's silly when people don't agree to that. Like Bitcoin is not competing to that because Bitcoin is just doing its own thing. But the only place where you can get revenues in any of these protocols is becoming the Google for everything. Just scale the system up to include all transactions that are financially significant.
Do you think that? Go ahead.
Base is competing for that. Base is not. There's no L2 that is even Unichain. When you look at it, is not running every market in a separate L2 instance because that would be dumb. So everybody wants to increase bandwidth and reduce latency of a single execution environment. Whether the world or global customers would accept a permissioned version of that, where you have central control over the sequencer, because that's a shortcut to make a better product right now or not, that's a big unknown. I think that if the market has a permissionless one that is just as good, it will just naturally flow towards that. Just like once Linux was good enough versus Microsoft in any segment of the market, it just naturally won because people are like, well, this whole system is transparent, as permissionless. I'm going to use it as a developer, as an engineer, as somebody that like the low level ICs that make those decisions. They always avoid the centralized permission versions because it's a pain in the ass to deal with them. It's opaque, right? You don't have any control. So this is kind of like a from the ground up revolution, if you want to think of it that way.
What is the timeline on being? And it is like this is like an obnoxious question almost, but like, what's the timeline then for the decentralized matching engine to compete with the centralized matching engine? And I again,
it's already for spot. It's already competitive.
Okay. See, my thing is that my understanding is there are scenarios that Max was pointing out of spot being competitive with Binance. What I don't know yet is if this is the long-term equilibrium once Wintermute figures out how you're placing orders. Like this seems to be the hang up, is that, okay, you can quote super, super tight until Wintermute figures out how your little prop AMM works, and then they spread back out. But again, competition will eventually, right, compete here. But I'm not sure that this is like, I think we can pick points in time maybe, and Max is doing a good job of that, where this is true.
Sure. So this is a dynamic system, and developers and Wintermute, they're all going to be fighting to figure it out, just like they actually do on centralized exchanges. And as we lower block times and increase bandwidth, those error bounds shrink, right? And the spreads become tighter and tighter.
Yeah. Okay. To be determined, but I agree with the premise at least. I agree with trying. Okay. I want to shift for a second. How do you feel about the public perception of Solana right now? Solana's long put itself forward as like where you want apps to come. And I think that throughout the past 2 years, everybody has been both surprised and genuinely impressed by you and also just Solana as a whole, bringing, like, wanting to bring builders there. How do you feel about the public perception, though? Currently, some of the meme stuff, right? Like, you get pushback. I'm curious, like, how you feel about continuing to be able to cultivate, like, the brightest minds in crypto to come.
I think the stuff that I work on is like the phone or the protocol updates, Alpenglow, and optimizing the VM, and kind of that's the tip of the spear that I feel like is like the sacred flame, um, where you get the brightest minds to start engaging and thinking through the really hard problems. Mev is, I think, the hardest, most interesting problem in crypto. So getting researchers to like focus on that and try to like, take it apart into first principles and put it back together as like a robust, reliable system that I don't know what else you could be working on that's interesting in crypto. That is, so if we have that sacred flame, you get a whole bunch of builders and like developers and engineers that look at your work and like, oh, you're solving these really hard problems. You're giving away all your solutions because everything's open source. That's what makes me want to build here. This is kind of, I think, again, goes back to my like love of working on Linux and open source software. Because the system is permissionless, you also get a whole bunch of hangers on, and around that circle of hangers on, you get everyone that is trying to make money in crypto in every possible way because it's a permissionless system. Um, I think the way that Solana should kind of keep growing its community is hyper focus on that sacred flame, work on the super hard problems in crypto, and make the product better as a result of that.
The Gort Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs, who I've been following for 3 years now. They're one of the strongest teams I know in crypto. Ellipsis Labs is a small engineering team with a flat structure. They build complex systems, primarily in Rust. For engineers who like challenges, here's the kind of problem they solve. A layer 2 blockchain needs to maintain 100 million accounts and generate a state root after each transaction batch. The root must be built within 50 milliseconds. How would you design a system to ensure the root construction is fast enough? High-performance challenges are core to Ellipsis Labs' mission as they build modern crypto finance. They believe finance needs more than an upgrade. It needs a complete rewrite. The success of their first product, Phoenix V1, speaks for itself, doing over $70 billion in organic trading volume. Now, Ellipsis Labs is building Atlas, the blockchain purpose-built for verifiable finance. I know this team personally, and I like them because they're unique in the crypto space. They have a long-term focus, they work in person from their New York City headquarters, and they're here to build products that fundamentally change the world of finance. If you want to learn more about their open roles, go to ellipsislabs.xyz/careers. You'll comment sometimes on Memecoins on Twitter, right? And you have a pretty, you had some comment that kind of rubbed people the wrong way recently, but I think you're being truthful. But I am.
Nobody wants to read The Intelligent Investor.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it to actually try to understand where this is coming from. Bitcoin is cool and a really revolutionary thing because, like, I survived one superpower collapse in my lifetime, so that is a thing that could happen. So why I would use Bitcoin is because I can use it to survive a superpower collapse. You need, if that's like a 2% prior for me, I should actually put about 2% of my wealth into something that I can put in a suitcase and get the fuck out to go somewhere else, to go restart my life, right? Bring my family and whatever, and to start over. It's not an investment. That is actually an insurance cost. But the only way that this works is actually all the ways that people complain about Bitcoins are actually corrected for. About meme coins, because if you have a single actor that controls 80% of the supply of Bitcoin, they could, in that moment where I actually need it to function as my store of value, that I'm fleeing a country, that person could dump it and therefore take away that thing that I consider valuable, right? So all of those things that people are complaining about are actually valid, but that doesn't mean that the underlying thing has um, like the intelligent investor valuation, where you can look at cash
Yeah.
flows and price it that way.
Okay, wait. Let me interject here because I remember when you tweeted this, and in the weirdest way, I know what you're saying. I think you're intentionally being incendiary by saying this, but I know
I
what
do
you're
troll.
saying. In the long run, if Bitcoin is this money, it is neutral, and you're right. It has no upside, it has no downside, but relative to current fiat currency, it can be an investment. So I think that when you talk but
No.
like you can but okay, I can easily refute this. I think you made the comment like Bitcoin works just as well at $10,000 as it does at $100,000.
Yeah.
You can take this to the extreme. If I am preserving my purchasing power in Bitcoin, it does not work as well at $10. If I buy a bunch of Bitcoin at $100,000,
Would you want to own? Would you want to own 100% of Bitcoin?
No, of course not. But that has nothing to do with what I'm.
But would you want to own 100% of Tesla or Apple or SpaceX
But
or Microsoft?
I know.
That's the
I know the
difference.
point. No. But I in a scenario where like you could make the argument that Bitcoin has not gone up in value, fiat has lost value relative to
Sure,
Bitcoin.
but I don't.
If
But
fiat starts to gain value to the
you're
point where Bitcoin's worth,
speculating. You're not investing. That's the difference. And you can speculate and be right and make money that way. That's okay. That's great. That is actually a net good for the world. But you're not investing, which means that's a different thing. But everyone that complains about all the scams in meme coins is absolutely right. That all the things that break that game of PvP, like at its purest form, by somebody controlling a large majority of the supply and like obfuscating the creation of the market, all those things, if they existed in Bitcoin, then Bitcoin couldn't do what it does, which is be a store of value. Because then I could not reliably use it to get the fuck out of the burning Soviet Union and like kickstart a life somewhere else. Because at that moment, right, like I could, and very likely at that moment is when you would suffer a catastrophic market fall. We want to avoid like the creation of these faults and creation of these things. And I don't understand. Like the problem that I find is that like there's all these tools that people have built. Meteor has even shipped anti-sniper resistant launches. Gavel is awesome. It's both anti-sniper and anti-sandwich resistant. But like, how do you convince whoever runs the Kanye account to go use it? Like,
yeah, no. I completely like. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not pushing back on this at all. And in fact, I saw Max's tweet the other day that was like, anybody would love this load, and it made people outraged, right? I think he's spot on, but like, I'll put that aside for a second. What I'm saying is this:
Max
like,
doesn't work for me.
Okay, so here's a genuine, like, this is a genuine question, and it doesn't matter how we feel. I'm curious, like, you see Kanye, you see Trump, you see Melania, you see this air of people talking about the trenches getting rinsed over and over and over. And you and I can sit here and say, oh, it's permissionless technology. People will do whatever they want with it. And I won't disagree. Those public perceptions can create path dependencies where these builders that you do want to come and build on Solana are reluctant to do so on the grounds that like this is the distribution. The distribution is this group of XYZ people. Even if you and I don't necessarily think that's the entire cohort, that can be a scenario. And like, I say this as somebody who's sympathetic to Solana, and I see these scams over and over and over, and I'm saying like, this isn't like Solana's fault. But at some point, if you want to guide this in the right direction, I'm curious, like, do you feel any compulsion to be like more vocal and highlight what you think are like the valuable, propositions for these builders who you want, the brightest minds?
I mean, I yell at the builders, hey, build an alternative. Like, show me how to do this right. And Ellipsis shipped Gavel. Meteora did a bunch of changes to the anti-sniping thing. Like, so where I can and I have agency, I try to push people to go compete on those things that can be verifiably proven to not like do the scammy part. Like, I think it's complex system because let's say Pump adopted Gavel. I could launch, there's 50,000 coins being launched. I could launch a market, no matter what its magical anti-sniping sandwiching market structure, but because nobody knows about it, I can basically buy 100% of it, regardless of what that Kickstart mechanism is. And then 2 weeks later, give the address to Kanye. So because this is a very, there's no closed loop solution to solve this. Like from an algorithmic point of view, it is effectively a shit show. And the only way to do that is through like moderation across all the platforms. But X, I don't like Pump doesn't control X and Meteora doesn't control X. So when somebody posts something, a post on X that is outside of anything that anyone that is like has a product facing website with users can even stop.
Yeah, I think that, and I hear you. I'm just,
It's like a gnarly internet problem plus finance. Like you take the openness of the internet and you add money into it. It's just like you have the negative side effects. And with ads, you see this kind of at like a very ground, like kind of Superman attack. Every fraction of a penny of a click is being scammed through like crappy ads. But here, I think it's just much more direct.
Yeah, I think that what I guess I would just say is I can tell that there are people like yourself who are extremely passionate about the engineering side and like this like North Star, and simultaneously it probably doesn't feel great to be called the Memecoin chain, right? Like if 90% of people think that Solana is the Memecoin chain, what you're doing, the hard work you're doing, the hard problems that you're solving, ultimately like this can weigh.
Go
ahead.
One is I don't think 90% do, because again, like looking at the user numbers, Solana does have the most users and the most activity. You have 90% of .eth on X, also on a meme coin chain, but like that,
Yeah,
those
you're
are
right.
those are a very small minority. I mean, I was arguing with Justin Drake on Bankless, and he said that Shiba or whatever is a culture coin. Ridiculous.
Okay, I've asked you about this before, but I think it's something that's kind of interesting because it seems to crop up time and time again. And this question really, or your response to this really drives people nuts. And I think I know why, but I'm curious, not the answer to this question, but I want to know why you think this drives people nuts. And it's when you say that, for example, USDT can issue an infinite amount of Tether on Tron. They have their own node that validates that those coins are real, and that's all they need. This is extremely jarring for a lot of people. Why do you think so?
Because it's true. Because literally, like the the reason why these networks work at all is because of this concept of single node is all you need for security. The double spend attack is a more complicated attack to explain, but you can actually deal with that too from your own on-prem kind of deployment. So basically, Tether has a single node that tracks all the USDT. When somebody sends them a burn request, they burn the USDT on Tron and they wire out those dollars. They have to guarantee that they never wire out your dollars without your signature. So that burn request contains a signature that the user signed, and Tether accepts it. That's all they need for that full node. Now, Binance has their own full node that has USDT on it. And if somebody partitions the network and deposits USDT to Binance and USDT to Tether and mints it out, the Binance node is now in a separate fork of the network that doesn't have the real that's not synchronized with the USDT ledger. That is the attack vector. But this is an attack on Binance, not Tron or Tether. Tether, all they care about is my copy of the ledger include all the USDT, and that's their copy of the ledger. If they keep it securely, their operations, they can guarantee that. Now, what's cool for that particular use case, Binance can just wait for a signature from Tether before accepting any USDT deposits. And then they don't give a fuck about the rest of the network. They don't care if it's 100% malicious, because even a partition there cannot convince Binance that they're on the on the wrong side of Tether.
Yeah, I think that, okay, so you
It
answered
does,
the question though.
this works in Tendermint. This works on Chihuahua Chain. This works on Ethereum at 1,000. It works on Ethereum at 5,000. It makes no difference the price of the gas coin. Like, absolutely no difference.
Yes, but when you bring this up, it receives pushback every single time, and you do it all the time.
Because I'm
And
right.
I don't disagree. I again, but I'm why is this a concept that some people, I think, maybe more
Because
ideological
Ethereum,
pushback on?
because Ethereum's narrative of having more economic security as Bitcoin is important to the price of ETH, because they want to displace Bitcoin as the store of value. So to do that, you have to show vulnerability in Bitcoin, that it could, like, right. And I'm grabbing my suitcases, I'm getting the fuck out of the Soviet Union, got my Bitcoin keys, and I get to the other side. And because Bitcoin has low cash power, it gets attacked and split, and the price drops, and I'm screwed. That is actually like a very valid criticism of Bitcoin. And proof of stake networks rely on the fact that it's extremely difficult to partition real world internet. Like, it would take NATO to effectively coordinate to split the Ethereum networks in really two partitions without a path between them.
Does Solana, wait, I can't recall if Solana has slashing or it intends to have slashing, or you don't care about slashing. I know you're...
The slashing part never comes into this. If I'm
Okay, but
getting
just in general.
slashing is slowly getting implemented. It's just low priority, because
But do you
it
think it's
doesn't,
important or no?
not for this.
But in general.
In general, it's important because the validators operate a business. So anytime you can create like a carrot and stick environment where they're competing for stake, and they can show, I have really good carrots and no sticks, it forces like the quality of the service providers to rise to the top. So to me, it's an incentive mechanism that over the long term keeps the network healthy. But in that moment of catastrophic failure, what really, really matters are the operators, how secure their keys are, how secure their network connections are, how redundant and reliable they are. It's not the slashing that's going to stop them, but because an attacker can bypass all the incentives with a 0-day exploit and find like a hack in like the Linux servers that everyone's using to run Ethereum nodes, and get access to those nodes and those keys. And there's nothing to do with slashing. No amount of slashing is going to prevent that.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned Bitcoin there, and I wanted to ask you. I saw you say something recently. It was a tweet. I think it was a response to something, and I thought this was kind of surprising. But so I don't know. What my question is whether or not your opinion has changed. I saw you say something along the lines of Bitcoin may have this escape velocity special snowflake status, and we're still waiting to see if the rest of this stuff can generate, well, maybe specifically like sufficient REV or just value proposition. Has that always been your opinion? Because I never saw you write something like that. It was like specifically worded that was interesting to me. There was like some recognition of a special snowflake status, and then some acknowledgement that we're still, the rest is still up in the air.
Yeah, I love how people interpret these things, because special snowflake is not a good thing. It's irrational.
I don't like that phrasing. I think special snowflake. But I think people use this term special snowflake derogatorily, because the reality is there are reasons for Bitcoin to be this special snowflake. In fact, you named them a bit earlier, which is that it's the easiest to spin up a node still to this day. It's probably the most distributed holder base. It's very hard to change the rules. And as you said, like
it has very fault tolerant markets that are global. I think This is what's cool about it. And this is why you could hold it and take it somewhere else and sell it and get a fair market price that isn't manipulated in some negative way by like a single cabal. This is the difference between Memecoin and Bitcoin. Is like, what's the difference between the Pioneer coin and Bitcoin? Is that you don't have somebody with 80% of the supply that could dump it and therefore like kill the value, the proposition you're getting from it, of censorship resistant money, right? Things that you could spend anywhere in the world at any time at a fair value. I think this is a really, really weird, cool thing. But the problem with it is that it works at $10,000 a Bitcoin, at $100,000 a Bitcoin. It just doesn't matter what the price of it is. And
But
people
you're coming at this
speculate
from
on
an
it.
engineering. You're coming at this from an engineering perspective.
Yeah,
No, this is
I'm
really
an
what it is.
engineer.
I know,
I'm
but
an engineer.
99% of people hold Bitcoin with the understanding that fiat is losing its value on a relative basis. So once again, I don't disagree that like
But you can hold Tesla or
no, but that's
Microsoft.
yeah, but those are investments. Those aren't stores of value. This is the difference. Like those generate cash flows, like you were saying, and this is the difference. Like I think there's this.
What is the point of a store of value?
The point of a store of value is to be able to preserve your purchasing power that you've like worked for your whole life, and it's a way to, you know.
But don't investments do the same thing?
But you're taking on risk there. Like we've been forced. The Americans have been forced into the S&P 500. Like my dad started working.
You're taking on risk with Bitcoin. It can go up. It can go down.
You're right, but that's because right now we're not in the stage that you're talking about, and that's why I understand the point you're making. But you're talking about a world where Bitcoin is this store of value already. In which case, that's your denominator. In which case, you're investing with the opportunity cost of not having it in Bitcoin. Like that's the goal. Whether or not you believe in that, that's fine. I don't like. It's a very audacious goal.
So you're saying it is an investment. So then it's competing with Tesla and Microsoft.
It's an investment now relative to fiat currencies. This is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is
fiat currency is not an investment either.
Right, because it's not a store of value. We don't have a money that's a store of value. Like it was gold, but it was like largely demonetized.
Ironically, I would personally, like based on my priors, like assume that you need about 2%, 2 to 4% of your total wealth invested in something that you believe can survive like a global superpower collapse. That is like fine. pick which that could be, but it's not an investment. It is literally like an oh shit coin. Because it's not a shit coin. It's not an investment. It's an oh shit coin. Like shit is hitting the fan. That means that when it is going down in price, you're not losing an investment. You should actually top up to make sure that you're insured appropriately. When it goes up, you're overinsured. Great. Who cares?
I mean, like I know what you're saying. I just think that in this period, like as Bitcoin becomes increasingly monetized, and in 50 years, let's say we live under, okay, just bear with me for a second because I know you're already going to reject this notion, but let's say we live under a Bitcoin standard, in which case you earn money from your job and you know that value will at least be preserved. And then when you go to invest, when you go and buy Tesla, when you go and buy Apple, your opportunity cost is taking that money.
Nations that need to maintain a navy have to use fiat. That is, just...
Well, I do agree that like Bitcoin success is not predicated on the failure of fiat, but my vision, like I really do like people. I mean, I troll so much it's almost impossible to know what I believe in. What I truly do believe in is like the total addressable market for Bitcoin is everybody in the world. Like I really believe deep down, like this is an unlock for everybody in the world. I think the rest of crypto is fascinating because it provides financial services that everybody in the world can use, but I don't think everybody in the world needs to be able to trade perps, like or is good at trading perps, or should spend their time doing that, or good at trading meme coins, right? But they should be able to. That's the value proposition. So when people talk about like, I get a little bit like, I think people miss the point when they say that like, I don't want to like this dumb digital gold is like, you know, if that's where we stop, like that's a huge failure. I think
it's dumb digital gold. I think it's really freaking cool digital gold. The fact that if you could have done this when my parents were leaving the USSR, they were literally forced to only take $50 per person. the Soviet government would not let them take more wealth than that. So it would have solved the real problem for me and my family had it
Well,
existed in
you
the
got rich, so it's
90s.
okay. Fortunately, they for,
Maybe the pressure of like that pressure cooker of early immigrants starting from nothing is what got me here. That could be, but that is like an actual solution that Bitcoin solves that is high impact that I can point to in my family's like history. So it is really freaking cool. Like no doubt about it. I'm not I just don't care what price it goes to.
yeah,
This
that's
is my
fine.
only thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like. I'm not
But I
trying
want
to.
it to work. I want it to be decentralized. I want there to be a system like this that is extremely low risk and fault tolerant and has these high settlement guarantees that work anywhere in the world. I think that is like a really, really like beautiful thing that will reshape like society. Um,
Okay,
but
cool. Then
also,
we agree.
yeah, yeah. Like I think I'm actually like, I proof of work is like it's beautiful. Like it is like a very, very simple thing. Um,
All
like
right.
I think I'm not competing with Bitcoin. This is because it's
Yeah.
one, it already exists, and there's no point to try to be like, oh, we're like Bitcoin plus plus with one extra feature. I would rather than contribute to the Bitcoin core and see if I can improve it and close the gap. Um, that would be like more kind of open source thing, right? I'm not going to build another version of Linux. What's the point of that?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of Bitcoiners that I talk to, well, not like I would not a lot, but like some of the Bitcoiners who I think are quite sharp that I talk to are we. I say we. I mean, I probably had different thoughts as to how Bitcoin would scale long term, but I am more open, or I at least acknowledge that like if Solana is the best Bitcoin L2, people can't see me, but I'm doing like quotation marks, right? Defining L2. We don't need to go into that. But like if that's where there's the most productive use of Bitcoin or the exposure to Bitcoin, like that's okay. That's not the end of the world. And if there's a lot of bridged Bitcoin on Solana and like hopefully people don't get wrecked. I mean, there's a lot of cypherpunks who would very much vehemently, hate this notion. But like if CBBTC and WrapBTC do a good job of giving people exposure and allowing them to use it, okay, like maybe Solana is a perfectly fine Bitcoin L2, or we don't even need to call it L2, just complementary to Bitcoin. So I'm like, it's like these revealed preferences where you see what people are doing. I mean, I have Bitcoin on, what's it called? Camino, like I
That's
have used
cool.
it. Like it's, yeah, yeah. So like
Zeus,
I'm not,
which version?
no, CBBTC, because I think like when I
Nice.
had it, it was, there was like some rewards or whatever. Like it was boosted. Anyways, this is a digression. Okay. On this note though, and I have like a couple more questions. The tokenomics of SOL, like this SIMD, what was it, 228, didn't pass. What do you think are the big, I know you always talk about like, it doesn't matter if it goes into a black box, whatever, but like, what do you think about the current tokenomics of SOL and like improvements you want to see, right? Like to, if you will, create this cash flowing REV behemoth.
I don't think inflation matters in the long term. And this is, again, one of those controversial opinions because mathematically it is equivalent to burning unstaked coins and then doing an even split everywhere. So it is effectively a fee on unstaked coins that then dilutes the unstaked coins to the staked coins, but it's permissionless to be both. If you're holding SOL, it literally takes 2 days to warm up or cool down to enter or leave the staking thing. You can even transfer stakes permissionlessly. there's like virtually no difference in terms of like how those things work or operate. It is just a tiny incentive to pick the quorum. Like you need to have some function to go pick which validators have what weight in the network. Staking is the way to do it, but we try to make it as frictionless as possible to avoid like splitting those markets. What that curve is ideally the curve doesn't exist and revenues is the only thing that's driving it. Um, because I think it adds, in the best case, it just adds kind of taxable friction. Not every
Yeah.
jurisdiction is going to count inflation as tax free or tax deferred until you sell. And that means that in those jurisdictions, it's not lucrative to stake, right? It costs more to stake than to operate something else. So from my perspective, it just kind of creates this dragging force. Um, there's another more like kind of microstructure economic theory that inflation should be equal to block rewards. And this is because you want the validators confirming a block to get as much MEV or value from the block in
Yeah.
that moment as the block itself. That's a very complicated thing because you can't compute the MEV that the leader's getting because they could be getting it through ARB opportunities in that block or side tips or whatever. Um, Either way,
And
right?
that's
Like my view on it is that like inflation doesn't really matter. It is a drag on um, the users of that coin, but from like a very high level, right? Like is it is it a cost to the network that people should be counting as Solana's paying X amount of dollars to keep running as the total inflation? That's just mathematically incorrect. Like your math is just straight up wrong there.
so then do you think like I don't know, that was kind of like a little bit mechanism designy. Is there anything that
We
Sol could do
copied it
to
from Cosmos because Cosmos was running and worked. Ethereum didn't have a POS network up yet. So we looked at like what was working, and I don't really care about innovating where I'm not opinionated in. So I'm like, let's just copy Cosmos and pick a curve that reduces because I think lower is better. That was
yeah, pretty
it.
straightforward. Okay, the last thing is and I know you're probably going to give me some I'm an engineer and I don't care response,
At
but what do you make
what
of
percent at what percent inflation do people are just people not going to give a shit about it?
well, it's not clear to me that inflation I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Like if it's like 1.5%, which is a terminal, right? Are people gonna just not care? Again, this is because
that's
with
basically like
staking,
I think Ethereum is what, like probably 0.5% or 1%.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I
With
don't know. I
staking, most of it goes to the stakers, right? You have validators that take a commission, but most commissions are zero right now or negative because validators get a reward from the um for making the
I mean,
block.
yeah.
So if commissions are negative, what what percentage of inflation should we have?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion, obviously. I think your rationale sounds as good as
Yeah.
anyone else's. Okay, last thing though, and this is what I was going to ask. I know you're
So,
probably going to give me
so
like go ahead.
given that nobody can agree on this, I think what's important is that there is a vote, and it doesn't matter what the vote outcome is.
Okay.
The process needs to run for people to decide a number that I think, as long as it's not too high or too low, it doesn't matter.
Last question. What do you make of the DATs? There was like a bunch of Solana Sol DATs
Yeah,
launched yesterday. I assume you just don't focus your time on this, but since I have you here, what do you think?
I'm kind of similar vein with so I think for it, it doesn't make any sense for Bitcoin. Sorry. 'Cause- but the reason I think why they're working maybe for Bitcoin is illuminating is that a lot of funds just have restrictions on what they can
Yeah.
invest in. So they see Bitcoin as a opportunity to invest in, a hedge or whatever. That's fine. My view is that we should have the least amount of barriers in markets so things can flow without like all these bottlenecks. With proof of stake networks, you can actually earn a return from running a validator. So this is like a normal validator business that has public equity. They can sell equity to get more stake, right? They can borrow to get more stake. All that is fine. I think the fact that these are public companies will force a whole ton of disclosures out there that hopefully the markets will do the right thing and will minimize risk, right? Like when this stuff happens behind the scenes, like the GBTC 3 Arrow trade and things blow up behind the scenes, there's an opportunity for I think really bad market unwinding because nobody knows the actual risk positions. because these are public companies, and I think the disclosures seem pretty sufficient, we shouldn't get into that, right? Everyone knows how the kind of debt that Sailor has, the strike prices, all of this stuff has been disclosed. So the markets can actually do the right thing and function correctly. So this is like my biggest concern is like, do we have enough information out there to make sure that you don't get into like over leveraged unwinding?
Yeah. Do you just maybe more like on a, personal level, like, is it surprising this DAT thing to you in the sense that, I don't know, like, I'm sure when you started Solana, go ahead.
Basically, like, finance is complicated. There's a lot of legal overhead. So it makes sense for a single company to go do the legal due diligence to figure out how to interact with crypto and then offer like an API through the Wall Street disclosures for other firms to go use them and charge a fee for that. That is like a natural outcome when you have like the kind of regulatory regime that we have. So you have like specific compliance that needs to happen. Every company doing that in Wall Street seems like an excessive overhead. Like, why would you go have everyone go spin up a whole bunch of lawyers and engineers and figure all this shit out when you can have a market like 4 or 5 dominant companies that go do that and figure it out and then provide that legal wrapper and interface, right? That to me seems like a very natural outcome. But because that's happening, right, that's a centralizing force. We want to make sure there's like disclosures and yada, yada, yada.
Hey, Will here with Blockspace Media. Did you know that we have individual feeds for all our shows? If you're watching the Mining Pod, Bitcoin Season 2, or the Court Show, be sure to check out the individual feeds. You can find them on your podcast player of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. Just type in Blockspace Media and you'll find all our shows pop up, or just type in the individual show name like the Mining Pod or Bitcoin Season 2. Be sure to hit that subscribe and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring you the best content in Bitcoin.
What do you think about the fact that like is maybe potentially could become a pretty centralizing force if this is if Wall Street is the marginal buyer of either through DATs or ETFs? Like, do you have any concerns about maybe influence on the network, or is this just same as staking pools and
again, it doesn't matter. Would make zero difference to Tether how much Wall Street controls SOL. They can issue a limited number of USDT on it. So for a user that runs a full node, it should make no difference. This is why these networks are so great. You can make them robust against these kinds of attacks.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I feel like we got through everything. This is great. Thank you for coming on. It's always good to talk.
Where am I wrong? Like, you're not an engineer. I don't know if you are or not, but I have a very like engineering lens on this whole industry.
Well, that last point you make, I'm very much in agreement with. I just think, here's what I think is that when you say this, it really like takes the ideologues with the economic security argument, it really takes them aback. And I think their secondary effects are that it makes people to some extent question the design of proof of stake. Because like, for example, let's say you went to the extreme with your rationale. Why do we need a blockchain? Why doesn't Tether just issue coins directly? And I mean, your argument, of course, would be the composability aspect, which is fine. And then they also have some, there's other nodes, right? And the composability ultimately is what incentivizes people to operate on a unified ledger. I think that's a perfectly fine argument. And I'm resigned to saying, okay, put it on a blockchain. I don't care. If like, it's one of these things where like, I have had to come around, and I was joking about this last week with Benedict. It's like, why is it on a blockchain? It's like, well, because that's where we put it. And it's like, all right, that's where it is. And I've never thought it was necessarily the most
it's because that's where the demand is.
Right, so exactly. And that's fine.
The demand comes from the fact that it's composable with a whole bunch of other things.
I agree. But I think that with okay, so here's my additional like third order effect of you saying this. When you say this about something, if you're referring to Ethereum and you denigrate the economic security, well, then now we have all these other chains that assets are being issued there, and they have different trust assumptions, and it really starts to make you question, wait, is Base and USDC just its entirely own entity? And that's why I think that there is a lot of pushback, is because you start going down, it's like almost a slippery slope. Your argument, your counter argument, composability, I think is completely fine. But once you break that composability, then it becomes a very slippery slope of, wait, hang on.
But you can look at Base and USDC and that set of machines, they exist and they operate. Like, you cannot, you have to go like actually look at the ground truth. What is actually happening there? And why is it surviving in the market? Well, it's because the Coinbase can control all those boxes and secure them, and they can provide a service to users. And the exit guarantees may be important, maybe not. Like, I don't know. But like, if I hold USDC that is natively minted by Circle on Base, USDC only needs that Base sequencer to validate it. That's it. Nothing else. Wait.
I had one last question. What do you how do you feel about the rivalry with Base and Solana? Come on, give me something good.
I'm hyper pro competition. Like, I think the Coinbase team is like really good design and like really good kind of product sense. So like, me telling teams, you guys need to actually go look at Silicon Valley products and like copy them and do better is different than Base eating at their market share and like putting that pressure on them. So I'm 100% for competition.
Yeah, but like also, I mean, there was a lot of criticism, I would say, from Base community, but then also Base people about the meme coin frenzy. And then Zora came along and it was slightly rebranded. Like, surely
it's all part of the competition. People love the narratives fighting as part of the competition, of course.
Yeah, no, I know.
If you look at the data structure, it's the same data structure.
Of course it is, but like, it is fascinating how there was a 180. I mean, it really was. Like, come on. And I know you agree with that. You're just like a little bit reluctant to go farther than that. You just want to do it over Twitter, right?
I mean, no, I think content coins are meme coins. That's like, who would expect me to say anything else? I think what's really, really critical about meme coins is that they should be more like Bitcoin, which is extremely fair in their distribution and how they're created. And this is where like, go fucking use Gavel. I like begged Ellipsis guys to take the time out of their like the products that they're building and ship an AMM that is sandwich and sniper resistant, that you can tune the curve and parameters and have a launch that doesn't suck. Go use it. Like,
and they're hiring engineers, by the way. I have to throw that in there.
Like, they did this as like a favor to me, basically ship this thing that is like awesome at solving a whole bunch of problems, and how like the market structure is bootstrapped in that like initial launch. Bitcoin didn't have to do that because they had like infinite, time to go figure out during those early days because nobody was doing anything.
But I think the unfortunate part now, which has been discussed I would say some people discuss this on Twitter, is that these snipers, this initial mania, actually helps fuel this ongoing cycle. So do you disagree with that? I mean, you'd ask, why aren't people doing it on Gavel? It's because everyone's on pump and these snipers provide.
No, I think if you're a celebrity or like especially like you're somebody big, I think the opportunity there is to like give 100% away the supply and like to give your fans a piece of something that they feel true ownership over in a fair way, and then use that as like a true money and like sell them exclusive merch and all this other stuff to grow the revenues of your real business, like whatever it is you're doing. Like, I think that is actually like a much bigger opportunity than creating a coin and then just cashing out the coin. And I'm disappointed like every time somebody does this that they don't think through like the second and third things that they could build. I think Kanye could have built a TikTok competitor if he'd done it right. And that is
that's asking a lot.
So, like, be ambitious. Like, go build a thing that
I
is
think the
like
thing is,
much
like,
bigger reach. It's
with
just
with
ah,
the Kanye thing, I guess one thing I would say, and this just kind of goes to another realization that a lot of us have had with regards to kind of like maybe we believed in some notion of investor protections and like a lot of these ideas prior, and now we see permissionless markets and we see like how these play out. I mean, we're all in a bunch of group chats, right? And we see everyone talking about this Yeezy coin. And I'm in some group chats where people were like aping, right? And not a single person in there thought it wasn't going to be a scam. Or, okay, maybe I shouldn't even say scam. Wasn't going to go up and then go down, right? Like there was zero.
so they're speculating.
Exactly. But I guess what I'm saying is like, at what point are we, I mean, we all have to come
We should
to
use
some
state
realization.
violence to stop them from speculating.
No, I don't think we should. And I definitely don't. Like, no, my point is like no one is being duped anymore.
Predator
Like
drones flying. This guy, it's Nukem from orbit.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always fun to talk. And I hope I'll keep using my secret phone and provide some feedback.
For sure. See ya.